I'm kind of thinking what we want to be able to say is then we want these next functions to be external download, external upload.
Yeah, okay, which takes an
No, it takes an external object.
external object, sorry, not service object. And this behaves like URL download, I guess.
I think so.
So it would implicitly create that service object if necessary, and so you don't have to
So
do it.
you
Yes.
say service connect if you need to.
Mm-hmm. But it would be transparent normally, because for these services you store the credentials somewhere where you don't have to prompt to give interactive input.
I think that's right. So external download of an S3 external object would do the right thing. Am I making sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a little bit verbose with the external object specification, but I don't think that's that problematic, because I just don't think this is a thing where people, I think people will survive the verbosity.
Sure.
Okay, so then we've got external download, then we've got external upload.
Is that, wait, is external download downloading it to an external location or downloading it to your current location?
Downloading it from the external. Like URL download means download from the URL to where you are now. Oh, okay.
Okay, that's a.
Okay, well, so for anybody who's watching this live stream, we should kind of explain what we're doing here. This is an internal design review of a piece of functionality for connecting to external file systems and computing services, and AWS is our first example, and we are doing the design of how that should work. And we might as well just go through what we are concluding. So first of all, there's a service connect, which is part of the whole service connection family, that connects to whatever the external service is, that will set up the appropriate credentials and return a service object, which at this time we're not really making direct use of anywhere in here. Is that true? So if you have multiple connections, there's only, with an external object, there's only a single, you're just making use of whatever the S3 service connection was, and you assume there's only one S3 service connection in this session, right?
That's correct.
I mean, we could also, in that external object thing there, we could optionally allow a connection piece in the association which contains the service object. You see what I'm saying?
Sure, but as soon as the service object is in there, then it can die.
I know, which is not desirable. But I mean, it could die, but it could be recreated from the other information that's in there. In other words, external download, if it sees I've got a service object in there, then it says, okay, great, I'm going to try and use the service object. If the service object is no longer valid, then I will re-request the connection. But if the service object is valid, then I can just go happily along and just use that existing connection.
So re-requesting is a bit dangerous, because as soon as passwords and whatnot are involved, we don't cache them in these objects. It's not safe.
No, obviously not.
So it won't be able to re-request the connection.
But why doesn't it pop a password dialog? Just like, I mean, authentication, if you do an authentication in 11.3, if you do an authentication where you give a username, right, but you haven't given a password, well, actually, authentication, let's see, what is it called? It's called password dialog, I think.
Yeah, so we do this actually.
Authentication dialog, yeah.
Authentication dialog, okay. So we actually, for database link, they use something called prompt. And we copied that, which also gives this dialog, authentication dialog. But this,
I don't think that's the right way to do it. I think we should use the authentication dialog mechanism.
Okay, cool.
Can you run that in 11.3 here? Brad, Can you run that now?
I haven't seen it.
Well, try running it, open, close. Just try running it.
Okay, fine.
Just try running it.
Okay, that's quite nice.
Okay. Very jolly. So just to type something in and
failure, missing parameters. Okay.
Well, who knows what that is? But press submit anyway. Did it submit?
I did, but now it's stuck.
Okay.
Okay, failed.
Okay, but normally that would return an association of username and password.
Yes. Okay. So there's an
Okay,
internal.
the way the authentication dialog works is if you feed it in a partial result, like a username but no password, then it will
I see.
not, it'll do the right thing in terms of what its prompts for.
Sure.
So I think that so what that suggests is that somewhere, it's a little bit hard to see how that exactly works because it's got to splice into that association unless there's an authentication. Yeah, I mean, that's the right way to do it. In the external object, there's an authentication option. Okay.
Okay. So there's inside this, when we're constructing this object, there's an option for.
There's an authentication option, and the authentication option might be that password thing, but then it's going to store. The point is that you are storing globally in the session the authentication information, correct?
We're not storing any authentication information. It gets.
So every time you redo an external download, you're going back to the external keychain to refine the
Oh,
authentication.
no, sorry. So you've got an authenticated client, but it doesn't store the information, authentication information. But it's a Java object in this case that we can't, that.
Okay, but so if you are handed an external object and no authentication has been done for that external object, something has to cause that authentication to happen.
Sure. So yeah, exactly. But
And so most likely external download would cause the authentication to happen, unless perhaps external object is not purely symbolic and will try and validate itself when it's asked about, right?
That seems to make sense. That external object would be smart enough to reestablish a connection if it's called.
Fine. Okay, so reestablishing a connection is an external side effect type process, correct? Is that correct?
What is an external side effect?
Well, I'm just saying.
Oh, I see.
External, yeah. Right? There's no. You can do it explicitly with Service Connect, but otherwise, if you just, call external object.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right? If that causes authentication to occur, right? There's no visible sign of authentication.
Yes. Okay, fine. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Which is kind of yucky. It's kind of yucky. Let's think about this for a second. I mean, honestly, normally, like for URL download, there will be an authentication option to URL download. Okay.
Yeah, external object should take the authentication option, and if it's built into the object, it'll try and use whatever credentials you've given it. Otherwise, it'll have to prompt you.
I guess so. And the storage of the credentials should eventually happen through our keychain mechanism, even if our keychain is really a stub to some external keychain for this purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's walk through this then. So then, well, we're not yet ready with keychain, so this will, okay. So Service Connect is the way that you would do the connection. I mean, I wonder whether this should actually be, I'm wondering whether we should rename this family to service object. No, we already have a service object. So this, I see. Service storage object. I mean, the question is whether external download, external upload should really be service download, service upload.
So what happens with Dropbox with Service Connect and downloading things from Dropbox?
Yeah, how does that work? How does the service connection to Dropbox work? Christian, did you build that?
We didn't, but we updated that. And
okay, go down the storage services Dropbox. Okay.
Query path. Here we go. Import file. Downloading.
Yeah. So there's what it's doing there is specific requests in the service connection, right? Which, by the way, we probably want to support in the case of the AWS thing as well, directly in the service connection. See what I'm saying?
I see. Yeah.
Why not? I mean, this is lower level stuff. This is less cooked. Now, clearly with Dropbox, we're going to need a wrapper that takes this level of connection. Let's take a look at how the path works. What is the path display? So their path display is, their path is similar to the bucket name, is that correct?
I think the path is like the key in the bucket.
Are you sure?
Yeah, Dropbox is probably more like a bucket.
It's a single bucket. Yeah.
Okay, but notice the metadata there of server modified, et cetera, as well as a content hash.
Yes.
And presumably there is metadata like that from S3. Also.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a function that gets the metadata from the objects.
Okay, but I don't think that's necessarily the right thing because
I mean, that could just be properties of the external object, right?
well, yes. Could we go back to the external object mechanism here? Okay. So could you scroll down to the stuff you've done for S3 here?
Sure.
So, okay, so the upload and download we think are worth having sort of large scale functions for, as opposed to just being specific service connection requests.
Sure.
So things like bucket list, what on earth is SQL tables? What does that have to do with anything?
It's just the model of
buckets.
Yeah, but you know, look, anything that's in database link is not a model for anything. It's an
Okay.
old, poorly designed system.
If we're treating external objects like files, is there a reason we couldn't use like copy file?
To do the upload.
And the download? Either one. And just
Good
use
question.
the external object as the destination. And it can have the logic for how to support the things like the authentication.
Well, let's talk about that, because the reason we have URL download is because URLs have some more tentacles that are a little different, but this doesn't. These are just files, aren't they?
That's correct.
Yes.
And
and
same
that
with
would
Dropbox
also,
and so on. Go ahead.
would also fit nicely with, I mean, you can directly copy file into local objects or cloud objects and stuff like that.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good
I
idea.
think that's a very good interface to use.
Yeah, I agree. That's not bad.
Okay, so let's go back up to the top there. So then what we're talking about. So then we don't in fact have, so we have this external object, just like we have local object and cloud object, we then have external object, but then we would have copy file of an external object to, let's say, a local object or to a file.
Yeah, so copy file of external.
And so then the semantics would be copy file could be from a local object to, I mean, you could go from a cloud object to an external object and, you know, merrily combine them in all possible ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And should we
Yeah, that's
support a sort of listability to download or upload many files at once?
How does that work with it? Is there a copy directory mechanism? There is, isn't there? How does that work?
Is that copy directory? Here we go. Copies directory to directory that you're.
So maybe that would be a bucket.
Well, also
Yeah, so-
the question is maybe so, but I think that the directory, in the case of Dropbox, obviously we want to be able to copy directories, but I think there's also another case, which is copy multiple files to a directory, which we don't seem to have here. Though arguably we should have that.
And also, yeah, just having multiple files, like lists of things. It could be copy files, maybe, where you have like.
Well, I
Copy.
think copy file would be, I think we can, look, there's no reason why we can't, yes, we could do that too. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Okay.
But the most important case would be copy a bunch of files into a single directory. So we would need
I see.
easy way
A
to
list of
specify that.
files into a single directory.
Yes. Do we have a directory wrapper?
We do
No.
not, sadly. But I mean, partly because the function directory is
Yeah,
an
that's
active function, but
Okay.
that's weird.
yeah, I mean, arguably we should rename that current directory and
Yeah.
start.
Mhm. Yes.
but I'm not sure that that's a doable. I mean, we could clearly have something called file directory that would be the directory for files. But it doesn't matter. I mean, any right. But if you have a list of list of files, right, then you can certainly copy a list of files into something which is a directory.
Okay, I see. So like, if it was a list of things, then
then it
Yes,
copies to a directory.
Even if you use the file wrapper, I mean, it would have to check whether that file is actually a directory.
Absolutely.
And in case,
yeah, go ahead.
If the second argument is a cloud directory, then it's obvious. So we would actually support quite a number of important cases by allowing the first argument to be a list of files.
I agree, and I think that should be implemented. So I'm not sure, is Konstantin the person who's the keeper of copy file these days? I think Joel was working on something related to copy file in connection with text search. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can move this over to CSC, that copy file thing, and yeah, I think that's the right place to do it.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going here. So we've now gotten rid of external upload and download. So now in terms of the file properties business, how does that work? So let's scroll down to your discussion of S3 again.
Okay. So the file properties.
Bucket list, which is basically a directory listing.
Yes.
That's basically file names of an external object, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll return.
So that file names thing would return a bunch of external objects.
Yes. Which are directories or whatever in the.
So then a bucket create is a create directory.
Yes, that's easy.
Create directory in an external object, and that external object is a pure bucket.
Yeah. So this is a bucket object.
Well, it's a if we need that, we might need to have a service S3 type bucket or type file.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it'll be service 3 and then type bucket.
With a capital B, I would think, but anyway.
Whatever, yeah. Sure.
Okay, if you think that's right. Okay, all right, fine. So then in terms of the metadata, do we have a file properties function? We do, don't we?
We do, let's see, file. Actually, do we have that? We can build it up from pieces. Like this file.
No, we have file information. File information.
Oh, yeah, that's file information. You're right. Yes. No.
That is coming, I think, in this version.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, that's useful. So file information is the
thing for getting metadata.
Okay.
Okay. All right. What else is there? So anything else is potentially. So the only issue is that if you implicitly get the service connection, right, as a result of an authentication request from trying to do a copy file, for instance, okay, then you don't have that handle, which means that you can't then make a service execute request to that service connection to get other operations done, because you don't actually know what the service connection is. Am I making sense? Now, I mean, isn't there a global thing for services? What is the thing for open? Is it service objects? What is the thing for all open to give you all open service connections?
That's a good question. Service object, class, services, maybe no.
Christian, what's the answer to that?
Yeah, let me check.
Look at service object there.
Sure. Service connect.
Maybe we don't have such a thing. Maybe we don't have a discovery mechanism for all open services.
There is this, but that's just the
services just displays all the available services, but I believe we don't have one function or object or something to show all the
So
current.
the natural thing, similar to our
service
other
objects.
ones, would be to have a thing called service objects open close, which gives you all open services.
Yeah. Service objects.
Objects, plural.
Objects. Yes.
Okay, but the problem with that is it's a kind of a yucky indirect way to get it, I guess. Although arguably, if you want to go in, actually, one way to do it would be, yes. I mean, okay. You know what? The way to do it would be, given an external object. Okay, this is the thing I don't quite understand. So given an external object, if it pops an authentication dialog, requests authentication, and then comes back as an external object that is authenticated, that has a service connection associated with it, a service object associated with it, where does it store that service object? Does it store it inside the external object? I would say yes. It stores the live service, and if that thing is saved away, what is the serialization of a service object? What does it look like? If you save a service object in a file, what does it look like? You can just open one. Just do it. Just open one. Just create a. Well, Service Connect to Twitter isn't going to work because it's not a public service.
Oh, it's not
right?
published. Sorry. Okay, so it's Service Connect.
Try some other random service. Could you try
Reddit?
Yeah, Reddit. Reddit is fine. He says, famous last words. No, you got to authorize Reddit. Go back and go to this list of services at the top, and go to one.
Try archive. Archive doesn't need a.
Archive. Okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Archive or open library.
Why aren't you being able to click on that?
There you go. I don't know.
Okay, Service Connect.
Service Connect, archive. And to serialize, you want to do.
I just want to.
Seeding. Okay. Yes. Save
connection. Why not?
Okay. Oh, great.
Okay. Now let's just do import form of that.
Okay.
So return the connection ID.
Okay. So that connection ID, if you try it in the future, it'll just go blip. I mean, does it automatically prompt you to refresh the connection ID?
Not necessarily.
You can try to quit and reevaluate that.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure this won't work, but fine. Quit. Okay. And then reevaluate this. Not connected. Yeah, that makes sense. This is also how we implemented the S3 stuff. It will also do the same thing.
Okay, fine. So then what that suggests is that you can put the service connection into the external object, right? So that if you want it out of that, you just do, external object thing and then open brackets, quote, service connection, and then it will tell you what the service object is, and you can then make a request to that service object. You get what I'm saying?
Let me just make sure that I understand. So you're saying if you want to use the external object. Okay, sorry, explain one more time.
Okay, so the external object, if you specify, initially you specify it without a service connection, okay, or without a connection.
I thought you did, that you constructed it with.
No. You construct it without a connection. This is just a dead thing that says, here's the name of the file, here's the name of the bucket, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay?
Fine.
Okay, so if you, and forget that authentication option, forget the authentication option at the end.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so now if you try to use that in a copy file,
it's
going to say, I can't do that. You've got to, hopefully, it's going to, let's think how this works.
And there's an option for authentication here or something.
I don't understand how this works. because the thing is just out there and it's somehow got to have a connection specification. It's got to indirectly refer to something, which is its connection. Do you get what I'm saying? Because every external object out there, as soon as you authenticate, every external object, you could have a file with a list of 100 of these, and they all have to become active at the time when you make a connection.
Yes. Or you just say, look, this is a dead object now, and it's not going to work. And you
No,
can.
I understand that, but if you have to do so, this question about auto connecting. Go ahead.
Yes, you could cache the service connection once you've established it once, and
Yeah, but how does it get into these external objects, or does it not get in there?
Make it mutable, and so as soon as it has a connection, it will store it inside, and then you can ask for it the way you suggested, either with a field or with a function.
Yeah, but I don't think these should be mutable. In
Well,
other words, look, one way to do it is that
state.
these things are not mutable. They do not contain the connection state. And the only place where the connection state shows up is when you actually do an operation like copy file.
Sure. And that always takes an argument, like the first argument is like a client or connection.
No,
or something.
it's not. No, that's not right. I mean,
well, it has to come in somewhere.
Well, it could have an authentication option.
Oh, yeah, I wrote that down. Yeah, sure. That's the other one.
And that could be a service object, or it could be explicit username and password, and so on.
Sure.
But that doesn't belong with the operation. I mean, that belongs with the object.
That's not clear. I mean, the object is just some symbolic thing out there that you may or may not be able to connect to. You can still do operations. If you have a great big long list of external objects with names, you could still do an operation even though you can't connect to them.
Well, the difficulty, I guess, also comes with the reason that it's nice to carry the service object with these is that certain objects aren't defined. They're defined for a particular service object. And then you have to.
What do you mean?
So for example, like your bucket, you might have two connections to S3, like one account and another account. And one bucket is for one account and the other bucket is for the other account.
Well, okay, that was one thing I was asking earlier. It wasn't clear what the answer to that was.
I mean, yeah, it's possible. So it's, yeah, you can have different service objects for different accounts. It's not a common use case, but it is possible.
In that case, the combination of service and user should be unique for the two different accounts, right?
Yes.
So if there's an active service connection somewhere in your session, the external object can look for that session. And two different objects that belong to two different accounts won't find the same one because it won't match both service and user.
I mean, we should do it the same way as, for example, a browser or any other service would handle URLs. I mean, URL contains everything needed, and if necessary, it will ask for the password and then remember that password for the rest of the session. I don't think there's any more complicated problem to solve here.
Okay, well, all right, let's keep going then. So there are global questions that you can ask given a particular connection, which will be asked through service execute.
Yes.
Okay, so let's keep going. What other things you need for the S3 connection?
That's pretty much it. I'm just going to look at the guide page very quickly. Yeah, I guess deleting something like an object. I guess that's file delete or delete files. Sorry, bucket delete. Yeah, I guess the file operations give enough for that.
Okay. So S3 buckets becomes file names, right?
S3 buckets.
Or is that directory names?
That's directory names. If that was in this analogy, directory name.
That's not right. No, file names can give you directories.
Yeah. But it will also give you back the files in that level.
Yes. All right, let's continue. Okay, so I think we need to, if we try to adjust this design to use this, so we're going to use external object to represent this thing. Now, I think there's additional work on external object, and we should make sure that whatever we have is compatible with that. As I said, Alan Joyce knows about that.
Yeah. So I guess before we continue with this, so this is very nice, and it would be nice to integrate this nicely into the Service Connect thing. And the one question though is, do we keep a separate AWS Packlet that has a separate design that is used by? No.
I mean, if you want to, I don't care, but I don't think it should be readily documented. If that's the internal implementation, fine.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's so close to the top level that there's no need to have an extra documentation for specific to AWS and S3.
Okay, that's.
And by the way,
I mean, a lot of this can be documented in connection with, external object. Look, what should happen is, just like in service connections, we have separate documentation pages for each of the services to which one can connect. Right?
Oh, sure, yeah. So there'll be a service
external
page.
object. We should have subsidiary pages for the various different external object types.
Yes.
And in terms of people that we work on that, given that now it's pretty top-level things, I guess it would be the Service Connect team to take our internal function and make it.
I'm not sure about that because it's got copy file and all those kinds of things. That integration is more like, I don't know who's worked on copy file, but I know Joel has been doing some stuff, and I mentioned before Konstantin has been doing some stuff on that.
I mean, the model would be how copy file handles local objects, cloud objects.
Fair enough. And who knows about that? I think
I do, and Joel does. Yes.
Okay, fine.
Jan,
So then
Jan knows. Yes.
Well, let's not get Jan involved in this. He's involved in other things.
Okay. So I guess the main thing for us, like what we need to do for this release at least, is like we're just going to supply these services. Like we can design them however we want. You don't really care too much.
Right, and then Roman perhaps can help deal with actually integrating them with copy file and so on.
Okay, fine.
Should be fairly straightforward, and there's a little bit of documentation work to be done around that.
Okay, so one question then is the documentation. So AWS Link itself, which will be called by these other services.
Don't document it. You can have external documentation, but we're not going to have external documentation for it. Because it's just going to be silly, because it's just going to be the same as the, it's just going to say it copies, copies a file, copies a, an S3 object, doesn't really matter.
Sure. Okay, fine.
Okay, let's talk about EC2 for a minute.
Okay.
So how does this relate to the create instance? How does that relate to what Roman will be doing in launching an engine, launching an instance of the engine? How does KCM launch an instance of the engine?
Well, at the moment it doesn't yet, but the idea is what we need is a representation, an object for a remote compute resource, such as Amazon instance that is ready to launch or has been launched. And
but isn't that what KCM, doesn't KCM have a whole bunch of functions for remote kernel and stuff like this?
Well, the remote kernel I mean, once we have, I mean, at the moment we're just providing these instances, and once you have them, then you can use either remote run or parallel or launch kernel, or we will be able to submit tasks to them. So I think we need to think a little bit about the design for this interface for cloud compute services, because we now have quite a zoo of those, and I'm not sure whether this belongs into the CSE meeting. I mean, I prepared a little bit of some stuff thinking about how this fits in KCM and stuff like that. But I mean, independent of that, we need these functions here for providing representations of running Amazon instances.
Yeah, exactly. But those running instances are the same as a running Raspberry Pi sitting out on the network, basically.
Yes, yes, of course. I mean, once it's running, it has an IP address. It can be reached by SSH. It can be pinged and whatever. So this is very similar. Yes.
Well, so are you proposing that there be a thing called, you know, computation object or something, or remote computation resource, or some such other thing? Did we not have a design for that in connection with KCM?
No, not yet. No, we never talked about the design of these things. There's one case we should keep in mind, and that is these job submission things like Charity Engine that do not provide access to a running instance, but that are pure task submission functionalities. And there is no reason to treat these separately, because for many cases, I mean, we can do task submission in all of these, and in some of those, like the Amazon case, we can also talk to the instances. And so we should consider a rather broad framework for handling all of these one-shot kernels or one-shot task submission environments.
Well, how similar is that to what happens with cloud objects, where they can be, well, what is that? I mean, is it like scheduled tasks, or how does that go ahead?
It's the same as cloud submit, right? I mean, yes. Cloud submit provides. I mean, there are these
cloud evaluate to a cloud base. So basically, the cloud base is the analog of these instances.
Yes. I mean, well, it's the factory that provides as many instances as we need, and so we have cloud evaluate for the synchronous case. We have cloud submit, and we could do parallel computing with cloud kernels. I mean, in fact, we are doing that with the new HPC option for the private cloud. Mm-hmm. So this all fits very nicely together. I mean, I think just we need in a separate meeting, we need to talk about KCM version 2, because I've now realized that the focus of the current KCM is too much at the low level of the parallelism, and we need to focus more on these cloud compute service environments, because these are new. They weren't on the horizon when I thought about KCM for the first time. And so I have a proposal for
right. Let's fork this off. This sounds like a good thing, and that's probably the way that this should be architected. I mean, as the internal packlet is, in terms of the internal packlet, whatever you have here is fine, probably.
Yeah, I mean, this works. I mean, I've used it last week before the redesign, and it works. It does everything we need. I mean, it does everything we need for parallelism, and with a little bit of work, it will also interface nicely with submit, probably also with with remote run. I mean, so these are all. This is in good shape.
All right, we should wrap this meeting. We're kind of late here.
Just the last thing, should we document? There's like about 20 symbols, I think, in the EC2 thing. Should we?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, we're not. Let's get a proper design with this, which will not be particularly difficult to get. And then let's try to get, perhaps Roman can help hook these things up to it. I mean, that design may be largely a shell that just calls through to these lower level packlet functions for this particular case.
Okay, so one very quick question to end this as well. So one idea we had at the beginning was that we can expose this on GitHub for users, and they can easily hook up any other functions that they need from AWS. Because we've
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't see a problem with that. I mean, I don't think that. Yeah, I mean, I think.
So the documentation was, I guess the documentation will be nice then.
If you want to put it in, you can put it in. I'm just saying that I think in terms of what we officially support, it should be the higher level form that is.
Okay, no, I agree with that.
Other things.
Okay, but is there? Yeah.
Is there an issue? This is like a driver, basically.
Sure. But is there? Yeah, is it an issue if the documentation is in the builds?
No.
As a separate AWS. No.
I don't think it's a huge problem, but I don't think it's necessarily going to get built onto the web and things.
Okay, sure.
Unless that happens automatically. I mean, I don't think. Does somebody know whether that happens automatically?
I think it does. Like the database link is definitely built like that on the web.
Well, then we need to have a further discussion about it, okay? I mean, if we're lucky, we can actually try and get this hookup to copy file and so on done quickly. I think we should look at whether that's possible. It may be a very straightforward cosmetic thing, in which case we can avoid all of this discussion.
Well, the EC2 stuff is still, there's a lot of options and things.
Okay, well, you didn't have that. Okay, fine. That's going to require a separate discussion. Let's have that discussion in connection with Roman's. If Sebastian, if you can be part of the place where Roman is presenting, and maybe we should fork off a separate meeting for that. Oh boy, that's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. This is already missing a lot of options. Yeah. This is why we also wanted
we can have it as an experimental thing, I guess. What the heck? I mean, we can have it as an experimental thing. It's going to go away and be subsumed into something else, but that's what experimental means.
Okay, fine.
We don't have a lot of bandwidth to go and, if you think
I know,
this is going to work.
Okay. Fine.
All right, those who are watching on the exciting live stream, I hope you had an interesting time here. And actually, we have another design review that is also going to be live streamed that will start in a few minutes on completely different topic.